Hey, John, what's going on?
What's going on, Drew? It's good to see you and all of you guys out there for listening. Oh, yeah, you right there. I
It's the
know
three of
that's
us. Yeah, the
yes.
three of us.
It's
You,
always the
me,
three of us.
and you
Yeah,
listening, watching.
just the three of us.
OTAs, dude. They're in full effect now. The first one was on Wednesday. We're shooting this on Thursday. There's another one today. You'll be out there. There's another one tomorrow as well. And then two next week. And then after that, the 2 day mandatory mini camp.
That's right.
But really, just about everyone was there or is here right now. So with all that in mind, here on In the Lab, presented by Xfinity, who were a few dudes that you saw at the first OTA
Mm-hmm.
who made you go, in a whatever sort of way?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
there was lots of talk about who practiced, who didn't practice, who was there but didn't do this, and blah, blah,
Mm-hmm.
blah, blah, blah. But
Yep.
of the guys who were out there doing stuff, I know the answer to one of these, but one of the rookies in particular looked kind of nice to you, didn't he?
Yeah, there are a few guys that stood out. I'll start with Kamari Lassiter,
Not a rookie.
and not a rookie, but I think going into the second year of what hopefully is a long career here in Houston, you can see where, and we saw this last year, kind of this transformation in Kamari, like, at OTAs last year. I remember the second week OTAs we go out there, and I remember the first thing that stood out, they did a drill, and I saw Jalen Petrie was at the nickel, and I thought, oh, wait a second, if he's at the nickel, then oh boy, okay, Kamari's out with the ones at perimeter corner opposite Derek Stingley. I thought, okay, I thought, well, that'll never changed. And as you saw the season go on, you saw Kamari seeming to get more and more comfortable playing on the outside, just being himself, playing with a lot of energy, a
He
lot of
got picked,
fire.
dude. He got picks, and he didn't have many interceptions in
That's
college.
right.
It was
I mean, it
wild.
was kind of all, you were seeing it all. But to me, it was kind of energy. And you could tell Kamari is just, he plays with his hair on fire. I remember when I was talking to Derek Stingley after he signed a contract, I remember Sting just kind of shaking his head like, he crazy. I was like, he does, but you like guys that play that way, that play kind of not so much reckless. That's not the right way of saying it, but just play with an energy and a fire that you want to have. And he looked really good. Now, he was on our sideline, so I could see him probably a little bit more. They did try and throw at Sting once. That didn't go well. So, I mean,
Hold on,
Sting is Sting.
time out, right there, right there. How many fewer times do you think Stingley's going to get targeted this year versus last year, or the year before?
Well,
Just based on reputation alone,
I think that's starting to increase. I
and I'm
think,
saying against other teams.
yeah, I think it's starting to increase. I think it will increase. You could see it a little bit at the end of the season. Like, man, we really don't want to throw
Yeah, don't even
24.
bother.
We might throw underneath. We might throw short stuff. We might do that, but we're really not going to challenge him with any intermediate or deep stuff. It's just, kind of wasting time and you're threatening turnovers at that point to your offense. And so you kind of, I don't know. So I saw a little bit of it as the season wore on last year. I think it will happen more and more often. The problem is for defense or for opposing offenses is all right. Well, you're going to see Kamari Lassiter, so good luck. I mean, we know that,
Right.
but he's going to get tested. But then again, he got tested last year, and I think he really kind of rose up and showed, man, you might want to go somewhere else with the football or have a different plan. So, unfortunately, the Chiefs did have a different plan, and that different plan was to throw to Travis Kelce and to throw to him often in the middle of our defense. So linebackers and safeties have got to improve in pass coverage, but it was pretty clear yesterday, Wednesday, whenever that was. Kamari Lassiter is definitely on it. I love watching Jaylen Noll. In fact, most of the time I watch practice by myself. I just like it that way. If I'm watching with media members, they're all like, "Hey, what do you think about this?" Or they want to, they want to ask me questions about certain things. I'm
You're
like,
not being antisocial. You're
no,
just trying
I
to do
want to
your
watch
job
practice.
and be prepared.
Right.
And know all
I
the
want to be able to
plans.
talk about it like
Right.
we're doing here. And so on Wednesday when I watched practice, I actually, Mark was there. And so, but he knows he'll come over and say a few things to me.
Sure.
And we were watching Jaylen Noll, and he made a catch at the end of practice where he's running kind of a short corner we call sail route, not quite an out route, not a seven route, like a corner route, but kind of in between that. And the ball's got to be kind of layered, and it can't be lasered. It can't be floated. It's got to be kind of in between. As buddy of mine would call it a two ball, not a one, not a three, but a two right in between. And so throw is great. And Jaylen's got to just run under that thing. And the ball's right at the sideline. So he's got to run under it and then bang, bang those feet. And it's right in front of me, and you can see it. And it's like, wow. But just watching Jaylen Noll move, it's so sudden. It's so It is just so quick and so explosive. And one of the things I noticed, he and Christian Kirk in particular, working a drill with wide receivers, they do a lot with their upper body, but they don't waste time with their feet. So they'll give you shimmy shakes and all that at the line of scrimmage, and they'll swap and they'll swipe to get loose, but they may take 2 steps. And it just goes boom, boom. So you get all this activity up above, but it's 2 steps and they're gone. That to me is the secret to really good receiving play. You see a lot of these young guys doing all these kind of and one moves, and they'll take like 8 steps. Like Travis Hunter, when he was doing his pro day, he was working on a slant. He took like 8 steps to the right, 8 steps to the left, and they're quick. But when you take that many steps, it's slow. Yeah. And you could tell Jaylen Noll is economy of movement, which I really like. So it was really fun to watch Jaylen Noll, Kamari Lassiter. It was cool seeing Jalen Reed make a play back in his secondary. He was
Penn State
rookie, safety, the rookie. Mm-hmm. I think it's going to be a tough nut to crack back there once CJ is back there with Kalen. And those two are back there. You got Petrie and Nickel. You still have MJ Stewart.
He's an interesting one because when I interviewed him right after the draft,
Jalen Reed,
yeah, mm-hmm. He was excited. He was happy to be a Texan, but there was an edge to him. Did I talk about this with you?
I don't know if we talked about it.
There was an edge with him where I think he thought, I should have been taken higher. And both guys do. And that's a good thing.
I thought he should have been gone way higher.
And I noticed that little edge with him. Not a little, but I noticed that edge with him. And I think that could be a nice bit of fuel for whatever he winds up doing this year and beyond. But he's somebody that was the overriding thing that I noticed from him in my short Zoom interview with him, the one-on-one I did with him right after he was drafted. So I'm fascinated to see what he makes of that. But sorry.
Yeah, I think he made a play, which is nice to see rookies just stepping up and making plays. Of course, everybody wants to talk about the offensive line and the configuration.
Well, hold on. What'd you think of Jaden Higgins, the other wide receiver, the first guy that the Texans took? Did you see much? Was it just kind of like he looked I solid, looked as advertised?
My comp for him going into the draft was Nico Collins. Mm-hmm. And you can see the differences when you just watch him and you're like, Nico's yoked up. And not that Jaden isn't, but Nico's been in this weight room for 4 years.
Right.
And you could see it. Like you can see how he moves and his size and just his physicality. We know that. And we already know how Nico plays as a professional. Jaden is still a little bit, he's wiry. So he's not totally filled out yet. And he might not. This might be, but then again, you don't need every wide receiver to look like Nico. But Jaden's very smooth for a guy his size. Very quick in and out of his breaks, very smooth in and out of his breaks, catches everything thrown his way. I think that's the one thing about Jaylen and Jaden. The receivers really, now I looked away a couple times, but at one point I said to Mark, man, the ball hasn't hit even a not 7 on 7, and on air, like ball didn't hit the ground. It was like if the ball got in the vicinity of the receivers, it was caught, which I think is a great thing. Now, obviously, there's no DBs; they're just running routes on air. I get it, but we've seen plenty of times, Drew, out of practice where ball's thrown very well, and mittens for hands can't hang on to it. And then we've seen times where receivers catch everything. And I think over the last few years, I think we've seen more of receivers that have better hands and better to catch in traffic, things like that. It does help that you have a quarterback that is very accurate and precise, so you know where the ball is going to be and can put the ball at different spots in your body to help protect you from defenders making plays. But I thought the two rookie receivers, we say this a lot as it pertains to OTAs when the team first gets together. Do they belong? Does it look like they belong? And I don't think there's any question. And it's funny because my comp for Jaylen Noll was Christian Kirk.
And he's here.
And so you see the two of them next to one another. And you could see it. Like Christian's a little bit more filled out. He's a little thicker. Jaylen's a little shorter, but you can just see kind of the same movements, the way they move, how quick they are. And I thought it was interesting. The release pattern. Instead of using all these kind of foot movements, they use kind of upper body movements, and it's very economy, like 1-2 steps, and then they're gone. And I think to me, that's more efficient than a lot of the things you see now, especially you see these videos on Instagram and all these young receivers are like, watch this release. And it's like, it takes you 10 seconds to get free. Like, that doesn't do any good. Get free right now. And I think that's seemingly the way Jaylen Noll's been taught, and he's caught on, and the way that Christian Kirk has evolved into that type of receiver. So it's good to see Kirk as well and go, oh, yeah, he's a Texan. Hell yes, finally.
Finally, after you and I saw him, first game
ever
at Texas A&M, when he zigs and zags.
Yeah, he had a good game that night, man.
A long punt return for a touchdown. That was pretty cool back in 2016. All right, offensive line, that's the big question mark, I think, by most heading into camp. What's it going to look like? Who's it going to be? What's the alignment left to right? We saw a few combinations yesterday. I don't think you'll see those combinations be the one that is out there in week one.
Yep.
Or if you do, it'll be a variation of that. But how much can you really gain looking at these guys right now in late May and judge from what you've seen? I mean, I know you saw some nice things, but how much do you have to temper that with? Well, shorts, it's May. We don't know what happens till the bullets fly.
Well, I mean, the difference between a collision sport and a contact sport is right there. Right. Right now it's a contact sport. It's like basketball. Basketball is a contact sport. People might not think that, but it is.
Oh, it is. Yeah.
But football being the ultimate collision sport, that changes obviously in spring training, I think, or training camp. I think the one thing when I talk about the offensive line and offensive linemen in OTAs, I talk about the things that you actually can see, but that end up being important. This guy transformed his body. And look, I heard, Brandon and Seth on Sports Radio 610 on Wednesday or Thursday morning talk about this in a sense. Not going to fall for the banana in the tailpipe, if you will. And I'm like, just because you're talking about a guy's body doesn't mean that he's going to turn out he's going to end up being a stud. But I think everybody, goes back to Kenyon Green and says, well, as I would say, Kenyon's first step is to transform his body. If he doesn't do that, he's got no chance. He did that, but it just didn't come together as a player. And so I think people look at it as, well, if he got his body right, he was going to be a star. Like, no, that wasn't the way, and I don't look at it that way. But guys have made transformations body-wise that I think can translate into better play out on the field because they're a little bit stronger. They can handle different movements by pass rushers and defensive linemen. I mean, I think that's one of the things that you can see, like just looking at Blake Fisher, looks different. Cam Robinson's a unit, man. I mean, that's a big, well put together guy.
And he's a guy that's been good, and has a track record.
Cam, and exactly. That is the difference between he and Blake right now. Blake doesn't have a track record. He's played 3 or 4 games, and according to all the analytics, football nerdies, he wasn't that good. But I saw some good things from Blake, and I also realized the guy's a rookie, trying to play one of the most difficult positions. And once he moved over to right tackle, he's facing Chop Robinson. He's facing George Karlaftis. He faced some dudes, and that's not the easiest thing. All the while with an offensive line that was kind of struggling as a unit. So there were some guys you can tell they've been in the weight room. They've kind of transformed their body. How the front 5 is going to look right now, they threw 5 guys out there, and away we go. And I know there's been a lot of consternation. Well, there's no competition last year. They put those 5 in, and they were just the 5 guys. And I always would say to that, well, yeah, because what was behind them to push them? They got the job because they were the 5 best. But I think now they've got, I think it's like 15 bodies. And there's an opportunity there for a guy off the beaten path, a Jalen Thomas, Ladarius Henderson, maybe even an Eli Cox to show themselves in training camp and show in the 3 preseason games and show in the 2 joint practices. Hey, this guy's got a little something. Make the decision hard. Make the decision at center difficult. Make the decision at left guard and right guard difficult. Make Cam Robinson work for his supper, if you will. It's it's going to be a work in progress until it isn't. If that makes sense.
It is. It does.
And and even in week 1, it's still going to be a work in progress, but it can be a work in progress together. It doesn't have to be 5 independent contractors. It's got to be 5 guys that fit together and fit the best. As Herb Brooks said in the movie Miracle, not looking for the best players, Whitey. I'm looking for the right ones.
Team at the right one. Yeah. Okay. Let's end with this. D'Amico Ryans announced yesterday that the Texans are going to have a joint practice here.
Yes.
Against against Carolina Panthers.
That's right.
And a joint practice up in Detroit against the Lions. It's going to be going to be before each of the preseason games. So with that in mind, I want you to give me your 3 favorite Texans joint practices of all time. I'll start my favorite, Texans and Patriots at the Greenbrier 2017.
Ooh.
Basically because it was at the Greenbrier. That was the best training camp of all time. That one and this year. So that's like my number
70 degrees at practice, man. It was awesome.
That's my number 1 because Tom Brady was out there.
Yeah.
Rob Gronkowski was out there. Everybody,
Edelman.
Danny Amendola, I think, was, I know he was out there. And he came and had a stint here. I used to cover him at Texas Tech. That was a fun one.
Yep.
Texans were we thought, going to be a pretty good team that year. They had the rookie quarterback in Deshaun Watson. Things were looking up. So that's my number 1. What's your number 1? You got one? I just hit you with this very, very recently. So what do you think?
Well, there's so many of them. The one that I tend to remember was the famous "Let's get the bleep out of Richmond" by Jonathan Joseph.
That was a fun one.
That was 2015 Bon Secours against the artists formerly known as the Redskins. And
it was cool and it was raining. So it was nice. It was like
you and I were watching it and we were freezing.
Yes.
And then fights broke out all over the field. Then that's the year we were on Hard Knocks, and the famous it's one of the greatest endings of the first episode of Hard Knocks ever. It's all this has happened, and all of a sudden there's a shot of Kareem Jackson and Jonathan Joseph on the sideline, and J. Joe's mic'd up, and he's like, "Man, let's get the bleep out of Richmond." Boom, and it goes to dark. And I just remember like, that
was pretty good.
That was about that day with the fights and the rain and the cold. There's a funny story about that training camp. I'll tell it here. Now we can look back, and it's kind of odd, but we got there and we were still doing radio shows. And so they had set us up a tent. They kind of took us over to the tent. And then a little bit later, they walked over and said, "Hey, when do you guys kind of need to be in here?" And we're like, "Well, we weren't, like, probably after practice, kind of thing." And they're like, "Okay, because RG3's mom's radio show has to be here on Wednesday or something." And we're like, "Wait, not RG3. RG3's mom's radio show." And I was like, okay, we just kind of like, oh yeah, and then walked away. And Mark and I looked at each other and thought, what?
He wasn't a starter by then, or at that point he had already not.
Been started. He was coming off the injury.
Yeah.
So Jay Gruden, the thought was that he was going to come back and be that guy, and he kind of got the first run, and then they realized nope, and then they went to Cousins. I think they went to Cousins that year in 15. So that was mine. All right, you got another one?
I do.
I have a good story I'd like to tell.
Well, you'll get to tell it. Just let me tell this one real quick. Let's do 2.
It's actually because of you.
3's a little long, but my first joint practice was back in 2010 because that was the first training camp that I got to.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Work. I started working here at the end of 2009's training camp. I actually had an in-person interview with Jamie Roots, rest in peace, where I'd gotten the job, but like had to get the final blessing from the president, and they had to make sure he didn't think I was some sort of psycho.
Yeah.
So I met him, and it was while the Texans and Saints were practicing out here in 2009 together.
Yeah.
But it was the next year in New Orleans when the Texans were practicing with the Saints, because you walk off the practice field and hey, you think, okay, I got to go cover the press conference. I got to do this. I got to do that. And before you do, there was a big grill.
I know where you're going.
Pal, Tommy Stetanovich of Drago's in New Orleans. He's got a few locations there. He's given out charred grilled oysters and a piece of French bread to everybody walking off the field, whether it's a player, whether it's a coach, whether it's a knucklehead like me, covered them all. But that was pretty good. And I had a few of those, and I kind of like went back for the free sample at HEB, like had another round, and then I went in.
He didn't catch me the first time.
He gave me 4. He hooked me up, but it was good, and it led to it. Yeah, we've been back and seen Tommy a few times over the years, but I loved that one as well, and I love joint practices. It's just good to break things up, see another team, see how things work, and see what goes down. There've been a ton of them over the years. I have a lot of other favorites, but those are my 2 tip-top favorites. What's your story you wanted to tell?
Okay, so I believe this was 2018. Okay. And so the year before, we had gone to the Greenbrier, and we all stayed there was a hotel we all stayed at. And we were there for 3 weeks. Mm-hmm. And I remember our good friend DP Sidhu complained every day. Right. She hated it. Hated it.
I thought it was just fine.
I did too. Yeah. So she hated it. And I kind of got it. Well, the next year, something got lost in translation. And so we end up having, like, okay, we can't get the hotel.
Right.
But we're not staying at the Greenbrier with the team. So we have to go do Airbnbs. And so
Dougherty Travel.
Yeah, Dougherty Travel took care of everything.
5-star travel agency.
Hooked us up with places. We all got these. So it's probably about a couple days, maybe a day before we're going to the Greenbrier in 2018. And DP's like, I'm panicked. I'm so worried. And we're like, what? And she goes, well, Drew got me this place. And apparently I'm staying there. And the owner just messaged me, a guy named Marty. And I am freaked out because Marty is, this place is like by the river. Like, oh my God, am I going to wake up? So she got really panicked about this Marty staying at the place where she was staying. And so Drew, in the ultimate, I'll take one for the team's like, look, I'll let me stay there.
Yeah.
DP's like, I'm going to go stay at the hotel. She goes and gets the hotel, like the Holiday Inn or whatever. You go and stay with Marty, and all's going to be good. Well, come to find out, Marty is like a mid-60s woman who was like, Drew, I'll do your laundry. I'll do whatever you need. Like the nicest woman ever.
It was,
but DP was so scared because it was like Marty at this river cabin, and she was going to end up like, James Caan in Misery or something like that. And I
got to tell you,
when we found out that Marty was a woman, I don't think I laughed harder for that particular story. And it was so funny because she hated it so much. And then she moved, and it was like, Marty's a woman.
So I've got an iPhone, and as I think you do too. And on the weather app that I have, you can like set your favorites. Houston is the one that pops up.
Yep.
But you can add a few other cities. And one of the cities I added is Caldwell, West Virginia.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's where that place was.
Yeah.
And it was a slice of heaven.
Yeah.
Like,
it was this really nice place. Like, there's the river right in front of you.
It was a river house on this property. It was a private, property, dozens and dozens and dozens, hundreds of, maybe 100 some acres. And there were about 14, 15 homes, each with at least an acre or two of property. And this house, she stayed downstairs, Marty did.
Yeah.
And it was almost totally detached from the upstairs, which was spacious and really nice. And a beautiful river house on this clear river in the mountains of West Virginia. I mean, I drove in and drove out, and it took about 5 minutes to get from the entrance to where the house was. Mm-hmm. And it's a rocky road, nice rocky road, and saw at least a dozen deer going to and from every single day. Shady. I mean, it was perfect. And so I always check. I'm like, I wonder what's going on in Caldwell, West Virginia right now. But yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah, that was fun.
And you had a sweet house.
Yeah, you found us a great house.
You were on like the top of a hill.
We were the downstairs of probably like a 5-6 bedroom house, and they had created 2 bedrooms, and it was enough space. It was the 4 of us, my wife and 2 kids. It was perfect. And so for the first week, my wife I can't remember, she had something going on. She had a conference or something, and so she was gone the first week. But me and the kids, we had a tremendous time. We like overlooking. We like walked out on the porch like the first night. We look out and there's a black bear
Yeah.
It was like,
You saw stuff like that up there.
wow.
Yeah.
I mean, it was odd to in a sense, but I think I'm trying to think the very first joint practice that I ever went to.
Might have been one of the Broncos ones up in Denver.
It actually was the week before. It was the Falcons. The Falcons had come here. Remember, Hard Knocks was here?
That's where J.J. Watt
going over the bridge.
Planted. Yeah,
that's one of the great scenes in Hard Knocks. And it's such a good scene. But that was Falcons, and then the next week it was Broncos.
Yeah.
Out in Denver, which we talked to Chris Clark about. We had Chris Clark in studio last week, and we were talking to him about that.
I can't remember. Was he with them or was he with the
He was with the Broncos at that time. And what I thought, and I asked him about this because in the one-on-ones, JJ and the Broncos O-line, in particular Chris, they were getting after each other.
Yeah.
Like it was really tense. There were a lot of like chest to chest blow ups and things. And I asked Chris about like, you became JJ's teammate the next year. And, you could tell that Chris was kind of like, yeah, we didn't talk a whole lot. But I always find that interesting about joint practices because there are always guys catching up that know each other, play together in high school, play together, on the same team years ago, same college.
Years later, yeah.
Right. And so there's always people that know each other, but then there's always my moment last year when I knew the Rams were going to be pretty good and I knew their defensive line was going to be pretty good. Early on in that practice, I was going to spend the day kind of with the defense, but the defense hadn't, I don't know, they were still waiting on the Rams offense to get down there. So I watched the first few plays of the Texans offense. And the first play of team, Jared Verse, whatever happens, a run, I think. And Jared Verse started talking trash to Laramie Tunsil. And I was like, oh, rookie's going to get it now. Like, that's probably not the thing you do to Laramie Tunsil. I've seen Laramie would get cranked up when guys talk trash. And I'm telling you, the very next play was a pass. And Verse beat Tunsil so badly. And I just remember going, well, he talked it and then walked it against him? Holy smokes. And then that defensive line. Now, once CJ got the ball off, he was fine because the secondary wasn't very good. But those defensive linemen for the Rams, holy cow. And I was like, that. I remember walking in. I was walking in with a guy, Michael Hoyt. He's now with the Bills, I believe. Played with the Rams. He played at Brown University, and so I had never met him. And so I met him after practice. We were talking a bunch and talking about Brown. And then I was talking to him about his defensive line. He kind of hit me. He goes, we're pretty good now. And I was like, yeah, you guys are pretty damn good. And it turned out to be that way for the rest of the year. But I remember that last year from practice, watching Stafford throw. That's one other thing, Drew, is seeing like the different quarterbacks we've gotten to see in joint practices over the years. Like we saw Matt Ryan and Peyton Manning that first year. One year was Garoppolo, his first or second year in San Francisco. Stafford last year. Just seeing these quarterbacks. You mentioned Tom Brady. When we were up actually practicing at the Greenbrier, just
Peyton
seeing
Manning
him.
With the Broncos.
Peyton Manning with the Broncos in 14. That was Matt
Ryan in 14 with the Falcons.
Yeah. Those are the two quarterbacks we saw that offseason. And those things in 16, we were out in San Francisco, and Colin Kaepernick was trying to come back from an injury. And so
Aaron Rodgers in 19.
Yep, that's right. We were up in Green Bay. And boy, he was not happy about that. That kind of was. I mean, I think we maybe knew he was a diva before that, but I remember after practice, he's kind of like, "Hey, Aaron, what you think during practice?" He goes, "Hate him. Well, don't like him."
Somebody delivered the lumber to one of his guys in a non-contact.
Your guy, Lonnie Johnson.
Lonnie, LJ.
Yeah, Lonnie was
it's all good.
Yeah, piece of work.
So that was fun. What you need to do now with Mark is bring this up with him because he'll have his own ball of wax.
Yes, he will.
But preface it and needle him just a little bit by asking him the question, which I do this every once in a while. I'll be like, Mark, tell me again, was Styx became Led Zeppelin or Led Zeppelin became Styx? Like,
no. It's the Who that became Led Zeppelin.
Like the first time I did, his head was like, and then he realized
who loses mind.
Oh, look who's walking in. That's perfect. So
yeah.
But bring that up with Mark because I know he'll have
the Who, his favorite band of all time.
No, it's the Guess Who. But he'll have
it's the Guess Who.
He'll have a good.
How could I not?
He'll have a good answer to favorite joint practices of all time with the Texans because he can probably go way. He might have some before.
Yeah, all the way
09s.
back.
There's
all the way back
because you got to put the first one between the Cowboys and Texans probably 02. You got to be in there pretty high because there was some drama there. But
there was a lot of drama in that first one for sure.
But yeah, we'll do that again. All right, John, good stuff.
Yeah, man.
You watching, listening, good stuff from you. Appreciate you. Me. We'll see you next time. This has been In the Lab. presented by Xfinity.